Like I said, it's just beautiful to see everybody tonight, because to me, that is such a representation of what community is and why I've come back for so long, 22 years in this particular community. And so I'm so grateful for this community in my own life and the love that it is for me. It's been a blessing. But when we say build community, to me, that's just such a healing term in and of itself, is like how we create connection. And then when we talk about how to build breath community, breathing communities, to me, that just puts life into that already healing term. And it brings us to a greater sense of inspiration and life in that community. And so the breathwork communities, to me, are quite beautiful in the multiple ways that they have manifested in my life and what I've witnessed in many communities. One of the things that we've all had experience of in the recent years, and that I've witnessed a lot, is that isolation can be a real major source of illness in our community. What I found fascinating is that one of the things that I've done in my work here in Milwaukee is we created a nonprofit called Core ElCentro. It is dedicated to creating access to healing, to building community, and to inspiring to wholeness. And building community was so central that we put it as a part of the mission. And why that was is because as we were researching the beginning of this organization, we started to talk about how people talked a lot about being and living in isolation and feeling so lost and sad or anxious in that. And we researched a bit of a study that was done by Powderhorn Phillips, which is an organization in Minnesota that's based in cultural wellness. They went across various cultural communities and put out the same survey. That survey basically said, what is it that you believe causes illness in your community? And across all the cultural lines, people stated that it was isolation. Mm-hmm. And so I found that fascinating, because it was exactly what we were hearing in Milwaukee in one-on-one sessions with people. And when I started looking at that from the perspective of how we are as a country in the United States, is that we've so focused a lot often on, and this is a generalization because there's so many different people in the United States, but we as a country often focus on science and individualism, and just this beautiful concept of how we can expand and grow and we're free to be who we are and develop who we are as people. And it's really quite beautiful, and it gives us a large sense of freedom. But what I've also noticed by working so many years in the Mexican immigrant community is what depth and level of connection and community exists there, and how complicated it is when we have that and we lose it. So I've been looking at different forms of communities throughout my life. And one of the things I noticed is that I think there's a way, and I really believe breathwork is one of those beautiful ways to model what it is to have healthy interdependence, meaning that we can both be fully quite beautiful human beings, free in so many ways of who we are and what our purpose here is in this world, and at the same time be lovingly connected to one another. And not have to feel either suffocated and contained in a communal space or vastly isolated. And so what I think is that breathwork is a beautiful model for that, because when we step into those circles of breathing, we are going for our highest intention as a person. We have the ability and the place to be there, and we're supported in seeking that highest clarity, whether it be spiritually, emotionally, physically. We're present to that. And the people that are facilitating are there to support us in coming to that, as they themselves stay centered in their own highest space. And the energy of that circle actually augments our capacity to reach that space for ourselves as we connect. So there's also this huge loving space there as well. So for me, the breathwork circle has been a powerful model of what it can be to live healthy interdependence. And one of the things I found is that now it's not like Jim says, not all daisies, of course, that community is complex. And I'm sure many of you have had experiences of that in your lifetime, whether it's a family community or a social community that you're forming, it can be really complex. But also that complexity is a part of the beauty of the breathwork circle in my mind, because we get an opportunity to heal where our barriers are, maybe that we came to with our families, our communities of family, or within our own social communities. So breath can really help us to move barriers that we've had previously, and breath in circle even more so. It can represent community in a safe environment that allows us to work through some of those or heal some of those challenges and come to a different kind of space in community. So I think it's quite a powerful space for healing as well. One of the things that Jim said in terms of how we draw our community in, I've found to be very true. I often work when we do the breathwork circles here in Milwaukee, when Lenny and I do them, we work together. And what I found is that we seem to draw in exactly what Jim was saying, exactly who is called to us. There's no right way to do it. There's not like a formula. There's not necessarily like this is the marketing technique you need to have. In fact, I really don't like social media. So I'm just like, and it's not that I'm against it. If it's something that's your thing, that's really cool. But I don't like putting my time into a tremendous amount of time in computers. I send out an email and we'll post sometimes on Facebook. But what I tend to do is just be present. So when I'm with people throughout my days, I'm super present to who I'm with. And in that presence is an invitation to join us, right? And that in itself is its own form of marketing without that being necessarily my intention in my head. And so it brings the people that are right for me. So I'm here to say that it works, because that I haven't had to be on Twitter and oh God, all these things that would probably drive my body crazy because of my high level of sensitivity. And so I've done marketing, if you want to call it that, in a way that really fits who I am and my own personality. And we've had full circles. So that's been quite beautiful, of people that fit us as facilitators. So when we send out that request, both energetically, and then we put out that invitation, we don't necessarily even put a theme on it. And it's been interesting. Lenny and I have opposite forms of seeing things. I'm probably a little bit more flow, and he's probably a little bit more logic and engineer style. And so, but we came to this really interesting thing where we did outlines for a while. And then after that, we just came to a natural format. And that format just became our format. And we stopped doing outlines. We stopped doing themes so much ahead of time that we would send out for our breathwork circles. What we did instead is, and this is something where I really appreciate Lenny's capacity to honor how I operate, like how I operate in the world. And that was to just listen to the energy of those that were gathering. So meaning that the week before, is sit and be present to the energy of those who are coming to our group, either those that have responded or those that hadn't yet responded, and then really get a sense of what it was that was being called for and be with that. And then we would take that intuition and that intuitive way of being, and then really bring that to our group, to bring it to the circle and lead the group that way. And it's been quite beautiful way to really listen, as Jim was saying, to the multiple voices, but in much more of an energetic dynamic. And of course, we have check-ins with people in the middle of the group, so we can also adjust as we go, flow with what happens and what is really being spoken to in that energy of that group. We've done retreats as well, and the retreats will more often design a theme, have an outline, but then also have the capacity to flow with that and shift again according to the voice, whether that's a spoken voice, a spiritual voice, a breath voice, and really be with that. And so often in the retreats, we've had this really cool idea that we were liking, and we scrapped it. Just said, this is what's actually more important. This is what people are needing right now. And so that's what we stuck with, right? And so that's just the beauty of listening to trusting our own intuition in that process of trusting our own selves, and then listening to the spirit of the group and the voice of the group as well. And so that's been quite a beautiful part of how we've run our groups. I think part of what keeps people coming back is also the safety that we create in the group, the authenticity, the honoring of people and where they're at, the compassion that we hold, and also the compassionate vision of non-judgment, the way that we look at and hold space for people. I think one of the things that also has really been important in our groups is that there are people that come back, and in that consistency, what happens is those people almost become anchors. And in that anchorage that they are, it is a way to create another way to create safety in a group, because they are there, they trust, they've been a part of the process, they've trusted the process. And now the holding in a way of safety has become bigger. And that's also been a really beautiful aspect of what I've witnessed of breathwork circles over time. Now, community, as Jim was saying, is not just in this larger group or in a breathwork circle. But one of the things that I noticed in the organization that I ran, I was, at the same time of starting it, I started transformations, and it was kind of a beautiful support for the stress of being in leadership. But what I realized is how we can take our breath to leadership in wherever we are, right? And so I brought a lot of what I was learning and a lot of the breathing to the complexity of being a leader, and also shifted my perspective pretty early on of believing that I could actually lead from my heart instead of having to always guide from my head, and that it was okay because it had as much validity as my head space. And so I was able to really have the opportunity to be very creative and lead an organization for many years from my intuition, from my heart, from being centered in my breath. And what it created was a team of love with whom I led the organization. And what it also created was loving service to a community. It just translated throughout. It just kept moving throughout. And so I really appreciated being able to have the playground to do that. Another way to look at it is, which is really quite beautiful, is I read recently, I've been reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book on Zen, the Zen of Saving the Planet. And he talks a little bit about interbeing. And I love this idea because there's this element of community that's not just us in these human bodies, but the plants and the air and the trees and the earth. And a wonderful way to experience that is to do our breathing outside. Not tonight, maybe. I guess if we did it with warm clothes on over on our part of the world, because it's a bit snowy. But to really get a sense of that the beings in our community are beyond the ones in human bodies. And to know that the beauty of breathing with a more expansive community, that the feeling of that support too from that earth community, and how really honoring that is to be able to have that kind of level of breath community. And so there's that interbeing that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about, which is quite lovely. And there's also bringing the concept of community to the individual sessions. So when we're in our one-on-one sessions, we are also bringing community to that session. Many of you know that I work often and a lot with helping people heal from traumatic situations. And breathwork is such a lovely tool to have. One of the things that I found is that often when we think somebody's lived through a trauma, it's like when it talks about violence, somebody did something to somebody else. But oftentimes it's not just involving one person, but a communal involvement in trauma. And that's so painful for many people. It's actually often even a more painful element is a family involvement, family system involvement, or a small community involvement, really. And so even often I've had some clients who've, a whole community has looked upon them as a survivor as being somehow at fault. And it's just old teaching, right? And so what we can do, and in quite a beautiful way as well, in these individual sessions is offer a different kind of community. And meaning that offers some healing in that aspect of we can hold a space that's about love, like Jim was talking about, like the elements of love that we can offer. And I bring my community of guides with me when I'm in there with a person. I also bring the inner beings. And then I bring you guys. Like I bring all of you guys, all of the love that I've gotten to experience in all of these privileged, beautiful ways that I've got to be with all of you. And so many communities in my lifetime that have offered love. And I bring all of that with me. And I sit in that space and I say, you are loved. And this is a space of healing for you. And this is a safe space for you to heal. And what a beautiful thing to say there's a different way to live in community in our world. It does not have to be of judgment. It does not have to be harmful. It does not have to be violent. And if anything, we need more of that. So keep expanding all those breathwork circles and breathwork sessions. And again, it doesn't have to be 10,000 people. It can be 2 people. It can be 1 person. And it can even be within ourselves. And so here's the community within us. And that's another form of community. And it's how we bring these pieces. And maybe that's the community that you direct, that we all need to direct at some point, right? On a regular basis, but maybe that's the primary community that you direct. And that's cool too. So I'm bringing all these pieces of me together, all these different aspects of community that's within me, and I'm bringing love to that and compassion to that. And honestly, in doing that, when I'm in a circle, I can bring much more of a grounded space that can hold so much more because I'm full here. And so that allows me in my own nourishment to be able to be in loving presence to others. If I don't take that time, I feel sometimes I felt resentful, sometimes I felt bitter, sometimes I felt angry or hurt. And so it's like finding that communal connection here and how beautiful that opportunity is to do that within ourselves and then trusting that. And that's also a way that we can trust our own value, is valuing ourselves enough to take that time. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jayne. I've been to and witnessed the atmosphere in the community that you helped found. And it's palpable. It's not just words. It's something that is felt. And I loved what you just said about all of your community experience is brought with you into everything that you share in an individual breath work. That's going to stay with me. That's so beautiful. Whatever we create here together amongst us will be bequeathed to everyone that we serve hereafter. I love that.